Welcome, champions, to the next overview and tier list ranking on any new or reworked champion active for the current event for idle champions. This is where we'll break down their mechanics and place them in my overall tier list for every champion in the game. But before we dive into that, take a look at my kitty cat, as I briefly remind you that I'm streaming on Twitch, and I will be going over the champion we talk about today live on Twitch at the same time I release this video, so drop on in and say hi. But back to the main event, we're talking about Skylla, the chaotic evil human warlock nestled in Seat 4, who will serve the party as a support and debuff champion. Her basic attack will attack a random enemy with her staff for 1 hit and zaps another random enemy for 1 hit. Her ultimate will cause her to create a twisting pattern of colors above enemies for 15 seconds. All enemies take 5 seconds of bud damage when they are hit by any champion for the duration. Additionally, all enemies, including any that spawn, are stunned for the duration or until they take damage, whichever is shorter. Her bread and butter for buffing the formation comes in the form of Whispers of Baba Yaga, where she will increase the damage of all champions in the column in front of her for each champion affected by this ability, stacking multiplicatively. Do note that the equipment tied to this ability will be her pre-stack, which is kind of unfortunate as that means we're going to see a 1 to 5 range, and 5 being rather rare, without the shenanigans of someone like Valentine to spread it even further. But for her debuff role, she has Fairy Fire, where when she attacks an enemy but does not defeat it, she casts Fairy Fire on it. Champions will deal additional damage to enemies affected by Fairy Fire. But she also increases the effectiveness of Whispers of Baba Yaga with Fairy Fire through Phase Flicker, where whenever an enemy that is debuffed by Fairy Fire is defeated, she will gain a Shimmer stack. She increases the effect of Whispers of Baba Yaga for each Shimmer stack she has, stacking additively. These stacks will persist for the entire adventure, but they will reset when you complete it. As it is additive, this will taper off rather quickly, so if you just want to buff up Whispers of Baba Yaga quickly, park yourself somewhere where she can debuff enemies quickly and stack that up for the current run. Her formation abilities are quite simple, but she broadens her horizons with her specializations. She has 2 picks. First, between Witch's Switch, where other champions in the party have their ability scores switched. Strength with Charisma, Dexterity with Intelligence, and Constitution with Wisdom. The effect of Whispers of Baba Yaga is increased each time the difference between the switched scores is 5 or more, stacking multiplicatively. What's important to note about this ability is if she is in the formation with this selection, it will already be in effect. So for example, you can make someone available for a patron with an ability score restriction who otherwise is unavailable. But be careful because this swap happens both ways. So you can make someone who is normally available unavailable. Then she has League of Malevolence, where she increases the effect of Whispers of Baba Yaga by 100% for each evil champion in the formation, stacking multiplicatively. And Withering Ward, where she increases the effect of Whispers of Baba Yaga by 33% for each debuff that has been applied to an enemy in the current area, stacking multiplicatively and capping at 50. Her next set of specializations are ways she will interact uniquely with Fairy Fire. Green Fire will maintain the color as green, but increases the effect of the debuff. Blue Fire will, you've guessed it, change it to blue. And champions attacking enemies affected by Fairy Fire have a 40% additional chance to deal a critical hit. And Violet Fire will change it to violet, as well as giving her the Breaker role, and causes enemies affected by Fairy Fire to lose an additional armor or segmented health piece when they are attacked and at least 1 segment was broken. Her equipment is pretty normal by today's standards. 1 for all champion damage, 1 for Whispers of Baba Yaga, which is the pre-stack, 1 for Fairy Fire, 1 for Phase Flicker, 1 for her first set of specializations, and 1 for ultimate attack cooldown. Ultimately, not too bad, but only 1 pre-stack. And her feats are pretty standard. Be sure to keep a lookout for her Whispers of Baba Yaga, 1 of which will become available to purchase with gems within 90 days. And now what about her achievement and adventure variants? Her achievement will require you to defeat 5,000 enemies that have been affected by her Fairy Fire ability. So make sure you're somewhere where she can debuff someone before they die, if you intend to just park and farm it. Her first variant will have her start in the formation with her Whispers of Baba Yaga ability unlocked. She can be moved but not removed, and only Skylla and champions affected by her Whispers of Baba Yaga ability can deal damage. This really shouldn't slow you down, as you want your DPS to be affected by the ability anyway. The second will have her start in the formation, able to be moved but not removed. After Area 50, enemies without a debuff on them take only 1 damage from normal attacks. So you want to make sure you have debuffers out there. A highlight is Nova, who debuffs every enemy that spawns. But also 2 animated constructs join the formation. Champions next to these constructs attack 1 second faster. Lastly, with the third, Skylla of course starts in the formation, able to be moved but not removed. Here you can only use debuff champions, evil champions, or champions with large differences in the ability scores that Skylla switches. This is a fairly restrictive variant, but there are quite a few options left. Now, what about her availability? As far as patrons go, we're only looking at Mert, Vajra, and Elminster. But when we're talking about Day 1 Trials restrictions, the only one we're looking at here is her dexterity. So she's somewhere in the middle when it comes down to her overall availability. So we're looking at a champion that does have a pre-stack, but one that's a little bit harder to work with, but can still reach respectable numbers, a debuffer, and someone who tinkers with ability scores in a new and unique way, but with average availability. But that might change in the future. We're looking at an A- champion. Now that we've talked about Skylla, let's talk about the potential flex slot options this month. We have Gromma, who is a bit of a Swiss Army knife, multiple roles and can serve just about any position in your formation, has a pre-stack but not the best scaling pre-stack, but is an all-around useful champion. Vlanya, who I would highly recommend steering away from, as she is in dire need of a rework but is probably very low on the list of getting one. Turiel, who has some purpose, and is an overall fun champion in my opinion, but by today's standards is lacking in the buffing department, and has no real means of scaling that up to make up for it. And with Farida, we now have alternative means to spawn fiends. Sentry, who is useful if you're working on an early speed team, but does fall out in the later gem farm builds. Lazaps, who was recently reworked and is actually quite an interesting champion, and one that scales uniquely with item level, as she has a way to share her item level with other champions, but is complicated to use. Penelope, who is kind of like Gromma, a very useful champion with a pre-stack but not the best scaling pre-stack, but an excellent debuffer. Whittle, who is an important speed champion but doesn't really need item level to pop off. Absolutely worth getting, but not necessarily one to dive into and focus on item levels. Virgil, who is a useful champion with many unique mechanics, but has kind of fallen out lately, just with raw numbers and utility. Jang Sao, who is a unique champion and one that scales decently, kind of in the same department as Penelope and Gromma. Minthara, who is excellent if you are working on an evil formation, scaling quite well. And that's gonna wrap it up for this video. Thanks for dropping in and checking it out. I'm still working on this borrowed rig, so, you know, I'm doing what I can with what I got. I'd appreciate it if you hit that like, sub, and bell for me. Drop in and say hi at Twitch, or join the Tyredack community Discord, or just watching these videos is more than enough, and I thank you for it. The most important thing you can do is have a hell of a time out there, champion.